So the title of my demonstration tonight is the art and confusion of off-center turning. And then everybody wants to keep calling it multi-axis. Well, some of it's multi-axis, some of it's not. So it's really off-center. So there's off-center. You can do it in a bowl of cross-grade. Here's two examples that can be done. What I'm going to talk about tonight is spindle turning, such as these guys. This is an off-center spindle that we did for one of these classes, and I thought I'd show you. This is a good way for finishing. Just take a coat hanger, drill a couple holes in this end. The articles that you can look up for, I think if you look for multi-axis turning or maybe even off-center turning in their index, there are some good articles here and there. So off-center turning can be anywhere from one axis up to as many as you want. Most of what I've done is up through one axis, two axis, 3, 4. I tried a thing on 5 axis, and it didn't seem to make a difference on the particular piece I had tried it on. So I didn't think it would probably be worthwhile, be much different. But then the other middle of the night, I got thinking about it, and I said, well, let me try a 6 axis and see if that works or not. And I'll show you that later. But yeah, you can make it as many as you want. And 4 axis is pretty good, especially if you're working with wood about 2 inches square or smaller. But if you get into more axis, even that like the 6 axis one I tried, you probably are better off if you have a much bigger piece of wood. You'll show a little more definition between the different axes. Okay, tool wise, we're doing spindle turning, so it's just your normal spindle turning thing. You can use, roughing gouge to rough it, and spindle gouge. You can use a bowl gouge. You can use parting tools and scrapers. The carbide tools are not real good. They leave a lot of roughness, and then I'll pass this around, and you can see the edges on the sharp pieces get chipped out real easily. You get a much better finish with your spindle gouge. In your
Would that matter what type of wood you're using?
Yes, it could. Obviously, if you're using a harder wood than what this is, then you probably should have less chip out. But that's one thing you can find out when you start playing with this. And that's the thing is this off-center. Let me flip this to somebody. Pass that around so you can kind of see it's kind of rough. But that's the same one I've been using for most of these other pieces. It's just you're cutting air and then you're hitting a piece of wood. So if you have a flat edge that is sharp, it's not going to give you as good a cut as if it's a shear cut, with your spindle gouge would be. So normally what I'll do is, okay. So I'll go through, and if you have square stuff, it really is much easier to work with. Rectangular is fine, but usually sew it much easier. Take your square finding jig or your normal ruler, mark the X through the center, because a lot of times you're going to be marking on those X lines as far as where your off-center axis is going to be. So right, with this particular arrangement, you can go two off-center axes. You can go to 4 off-center axes. If you're going to go to 3, which I do a lot of 3, then you probably want to get something that's made out into 120 degrees. So I made this some time ago and I can't remember how I got those little skinny cuts in it. Obviously I drilled a hole and then I must have had a really small, blade on a router, to cut those. But I put that in the center. I got a nail that I posted right in the center, then you can mark. So you have your 3 axes on there. I also had, here it is. I just took a piece of old card. I probably overspent on the credit card. And I made this, so that gives you that 120-degree angle. I put a hole in the center. I can put that little nail or pin in it, and then if you line it up on one line and draw the line off the other, that gives you those 3 axes that are off center. Just move it from that one line that you already have, draw your line here, and then move it to that line with your center, and your 3rd axis will be marked on it. Obviously, I use this most of the time. So when you're marking your axis, it's better if you mark them, and let's go 4 axes, and I usually use a ruler to measure how far apart they're going to be so they're all the same. Now, they don't have to be, but I think when you're starting out, I would make your distance from the center pretty consistent so you get some idea of what's going on. If you start to change like this is 4, if they're not all exactly the same, you're going to have some really wonky looking stuff. So it would be good to do that. So once you mark it, you want to number each axis, and I usually just go start 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Now on the bottom side, you want to number it exactly the same way. So I'm going to flip this over. This is number 1. So this would be number 1 right here. Okay, so that's number 1. Now number 2 is where? Over here, right? So I went around this way. So you want to make sure that, and so a lot of times I'll mark on the outside here. Am I overhead? Okay. So there's 1, 2, there's 3, and then there's 4. So when I get up on this end, I look down, okay, there's number 1. And so I put a number 1 right there. And oh, this side is number 2. So this would be number 2, and so on around. So it's almost in the opposite direction on the opposite side. So most of the turning that you're going to do will be either you're going to go 1 to 1 or you're going to go 1 to 2. So 1 to 1 is going to give you parallel axis. 1 to 2 is going to give you a twisted axis. And so those are the main categories, and and we'll talk a little bit more about some of them. So as long as you're going 1 to 1, you're going to have the same thing parallel all the way up and down. The other is going to give you a twisted axis.
Do you have a sample of 1 to 1?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay.
So the other thing is how far you are from the center with your axis. The further out you go, the more wonky it gets. And so is that a new term to somebody? Wonky. Definition for what I had to look it up. Wonky means crooked, means off center, askew, unsteady, shaky, whatever. So, and that's really a perfect word for this, because the more off center you get, the more wonky it can be, the more shaky and stuff. Generally speaking, on a 2-inch block like this, you're going to keep it in anywhere from about 1/4 inch off center, 3/8, 1/2 inch. If you go much more than 1/2 inch, then you're really looking at some possibility of things flying, because especially if it's a long board like this in a lot of turns and it gets thinner and thinner, as you're compressing from, for your tailstock and headstock, what happens is you start bending this. And when that starts to bend, then it gets really kind of wonky. And if you get a little catch here or there, it's probably gonna pop on you, snap. And I'll show you some examples of, somebody else did these. I had, yes, I did. So when you're first starting out, kind of keep it close in, keeps the beef, keeps the thickness of the wood, so it doesn't get too thin on you and it doesn't start to bend as you're tightening this up. Now you're going to be spinning these somewhere around 1800 RPM, because when you're cutting a lot of air on every one of these things, if you're cutting slow, it really beats you up. You have to cut it fast, and you need sharp tools. So you're going to run this thing up to 1800. So you want to make sure it's tight, because that's pretty, and it's off center. So it's, you know, if it's a big piece, it's probably moving your lathe around if you go that fast, but the smaller pieces, it's not too bad. Any questions on any of that? Yeah. Okay.
But you say that yours, most of yours are 2x2s?
These, most of what I have here are 2x2s. Now, there can be smaller, okay, but the same thing, though, you want to keep that axis in a little bit tighter then. So my note said don't exceed 3/4 inch off center, okay? You can do that depending on what it is you're making. But you'll learn that there's yeah. You have to know what's going to happen when you change axis and how much wood you're going to have between the two different axes to support everything. The further out they are apart, as you're tightening up the board, as I said earlier, then you're taking a chance on that thing getting back. What are the other things you're going to do? Every time that you change axis, you need to sand what you've done on that particular axis before you move on. Now, you can go back sometimes. The same thing with cutting. You want to do almost all the cutting you need to do on that, but when you start doing some of the angle cuts and stuff, sometimes you have to go back and clean up the two different ones. But you want to sand before you move on, for two reasons. Number one, then you don't have to, you're done with that axis. The other thing is if it starts to get a little bit thin and starts to flex, then you can't really go back, because it's going to be off that center and won't be as smooth and easy to sand. So let's see. So one way to help you out on some of this, and this is not a foolproof thing, is that once you've marked your centers, are we still overhead? Once you've marked your centers, if you can take a compass, and a little further over in, or this way.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. You can take a compass, put it in your mark, and draw a circle to see what's going to happen on that particular axis. So if they're all the same, then you can draw 4 of them. Then you can see what kind of overlap you get on the circles, and thinking that, okay, so if I do number 1 and then number 2, those are going to have some overlap. So if there's no overlap between those two, then it's error. So it's gonna fly or break or crack or whatever. So it gives you an idea, but it's not foolproof though, because I've done enough of them now to know that it's not going to always give you the true story. Okay, so most of the time you're going to mount this between centers, and then you're going to go in and turn it around. And then once you get it round, then you can kind of divide it. If you're going to be doing 3 different axes, you maybe divide it in thirds of what's left, or fourths if it's four different axes, or 2, you don't have to divide it at all, or 1. But it gives you some idea of spacing, if you're gonna do it circles or rather, beads, it's all beads and V's for the most part of what you're doing. So if you're gonna put beads, let's say if this 3-axis, you're gonna do 3 beads and then separate and then join the 2 together, the 3 together. That gives you some perspective as far as where it should be on there, and it be a little more symmetrical. Now, if you don't want symmetrical, then you don't really care. You can just go up there and start doing what you want to do to give it the contours that you want to do it. But most of the stuff that I've been doing, I've been marking it all out. So I'm sort of knowing if I'm doing 4-axis, I got 4 different places that I'm going to be changing to make my design. Any questions? Is that confusing? No? Okay. Generally, for most of these, I have been keeping the end square, especially if you're turning your points or outside pretty far. Leave a little beef here at the end, so you don't get real thin here and it'll flex on you even more. So since I'm using these for the wig stands, then I got a 3/4 inch or so hole. I'm going to put the round in, and then I leave another 1/2 inch or so just for the base of what's going to be showing on the thing. So that kind of gives us some idea. But you don't want to turn that thing all around. Now, if you're really tight on your axis points, you know, 1/4 inch or so from the center, you could go ahead and round the whole thing if you want. But generally speaking, I leave the end a little bit square so it has some beef back there. You can use the parting tool to delineate your measurements if you want to. And that helps out an awful lot. Or I just, once I've rounded it, then I'll measure it and mark it with a piece of pencil. Or if you want to mark it before you round it and use a parting tool to cut through to the point where it's going to round, that also leaves you with a mark that you can use. The important thing, again, I can't emphasize, sand before you move on. Okay, so basically round it and you're good to go. Mark where you want to start, what you want to do, put it on your first mark, your number 1, and number 1 on this end, or number 2, or whatever you're going to set it up to do with. And then cut your shape, sand it, and then move on to the next axis. And then you're finished. That's pretty simple, right? Okay. I've got about 10 pieces of these. These are the categories for the positions of off-center turning. First one is 1-axis centered. It's pretty simple. The second one is 2-axis to the center. So what basically that means, there's 2 axes on one end and your other end is going back to the center. So there's so many multiples of ways that you can do this. The third one is 2 axes parallel to each other. So then you can have 2 axes twisted. And then you can go, you can twist them 90 degrees to each other if you want for 2 axes. And you know, and then there's 3 axes parallel, 3 axes twisted, 3 axes to center. Then you go up to 4 axes and you can go up to more than that. So these are the kind of positions. And I gave a drawing. Where are you over here? Okay. To show you what it looks like on the square where you put your points and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a basic thing. I only have 10 of these. But if you want, I have, if you email me, I can email you that information in a document. The other thing I have done is I've taken photographs of all these different funny looking things based on the position of the axis on that sheet there. So number one would be a one axis thing and all that sort of thing. So the other thing I do is normally I'll mark what is the headstock and what's the tailstock. Because if you're doing one axis on the headstock or a single axis on one end and you're doing 2 or 3 on the other end, then you don't mess it up too bad. So we're going to start off with someone asked about one axis. So let's see what we got. All right, so this is number one. This is off center. And I'm moving this. I'm moving this out 3/4 of an inch. Okay. Now I like to wiggle this, especially on this end, to get this end in tight, because this is your dry center. And you need that to be tight, so when you start cutting that, it just doesn't spin on you. Now I like this center because if you get a little catch, it's gonna spin rather than just tear out. I know Barbara Dill liked 4-prong center to put on this end. I found that this works really well and it probably saves you from
What kind of center is it? Safety center.
the safety center. Yeah. So whenever you set up, make sure that you spin it by hand because you can see how off center that is. Are you over a time? Yeah, there we go. Okay, we need to move the camera over. So that's pretty off center. So you want to make sure it's tight and make sure you're not hitting your tool rest. Now, a lot of these, once you mark have your tool rest set for a distance from there, you don't have to change it, but you will anyway, because when you sand it, you're going to move the tool rest most of the time. Now, I'm not going to do any sanding at all tonight because it makes a mess and it'll fill the air. At home, I have a dust collector that I have with my lathe, so I can get by with doing that. Okay, so are we ready to go? Any questions yet?
Pretty close.
Ready? Okay. Generally speaking, turn your lathe on, have it on 0, crank it up. This will be fun. So right now, I'm about 1,800. I prefer to use this spindle gouge. It's really small, so I can get curves and, the beads and codes, however you want. So this one, I gotta stand it out of the way. Start over again. Get the set. So I'm about center. That sounds like this lady here. Oh, yeah. Nobody remind me, my wife is the one that's, she's my Murphy, I think.
Yes, it could go on.
Okay, gotta say, yeah, do I need this, guys? Well, yeah, really, look at this thing. It's pretty wonky. So, yeah. Okay, so this is going to be the end that I'm gonna taper to. And we'll just start here. And you don't want to be in too big a hurry. I did this demo up at the Kerrville Club for a warm up. And I got a little excited and pressed for time and started hurrying and, it just doesn't say it. Keep on going. But it gives you a good start cutting air. And you can be looking at the horizon here to see when the air is coming and when the wind's coming. So it'll give you an idea. That was pretty solid all the way down. You gotta switch hands. Makes it easier to ride the bevel. And if you can ride the bevel, then you're gonna go to smooth itself. Sideways smooth. Probably because I'm still in the air here. Down at this end, that we're pretty round now. Okay.
Right. Why wouldn't you add on the solar to the follow profile of what the?
Well, you can do that, once you get started, so that's a good point. Okay, turn that. Now, once you've got this turn, you got your angle, that's a good idea. Gives you easier control. So, my goal then is to take this down quite a bit more. And I think you're gonna end up with, I guess I would call it in geometry, be a crusty, possibly. That's right. Okay. There it is. It's not perfect. I'm not gonna worry about it. I just wanna keep moving, because there's so much to do. Okay, so there we go.
So on that one, did you just move one side?
Yes,
Okay,
center on the headstock, tailstock was 3/4 of an inch off the center. It was a fairly wide piece of wood, so I could do that. But I wanted that because, and what good is that? Well, if you make beehive, you know, Frank, right? Or Gordon? So you put that on there and take a better looking piece of wire than this whole beat up hanger. So there you got a display. So now if you make pendants and you want to display them, you can hang a pendant on there. If you know somebody that does glass work and they make rings and pendants, you can do that sort of thing, and you can make this as long or short as you want to hang out the
ornaments.
ornaments. Yeah. Okay, so then we're gonna go to 2-axis. But this is gonna be 2-axis to center. So what I've done is I've drilled a hole in this already for a candle. Plastic, one of these plastic candles. But I didn't want it just a plain straight up and down thing, so I'm gonna put this in the headstock. And I've got 2-axis marked. These are 3/8 of an inch apart, and we'll see how that works out. So the single axis, I'm gonna leave on the headstock. Run the tailstock and we'll hit number 1. Since I've rounded this already, I don't have to go to center on the tailstock. So I've already rounded it. So we're gonna go from here. Now I've drawn lines on where I think I'm gonna just kind of cut these in this. I want to make sure that this one is below where the candle's gonna fit. And then the others I can just kind of wing it in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Just.
Okay, so just tool rest. And don't let me forget to do that because that could be a disaster. So this is 2-axis. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a V, so I'm gonna start with this one line, cut a V from both directions. Oh, you did. Oh, thought the lid was taken off. Okay. Now I'm not gonna go to these because I don't wanna start off with a flyer. Try to smooth it as best I can. Okay, now I found, even though I've indexed this with all these lines, so where you're gonna intersect with another line, to get a nice, smooth, sharp intersection between the two lines, then you need to go over that other line a little bit. For part of, not the whole thing, but part of it. And I'll show you what happens. So I'm not gonna do that until I'm gonna change axis. Go to number 2. So number 1 is done.
Okay, so normally you would sand at this point.
You bet.
Gotcha.
So now go to number 2. Good. Now I'm gonna do the same thing. So I've got my line here, that's my V, so I'm gonna cut the V from there. And then we'll work that intersection part. Okay, so now I want to show you where we are in the intersection. You can see this line is nice and sharp all the way up. Right here is a little flat. Can we see that? I'll turn it over the side. So right here it's a little bit flat. So I don't have that perfect sharp lines, which means I need to cut it into this a little bit further to keep that sharp. Now, sometimes it gets way down, the one side, it will be way down this low. And so you just keep going until you get, or you flip back to your previous one and do a little more cutting on this side, then to balance that a little bit. But you'll find that these intersections between your various elements, like if we're going to do a bead over here and then a bead over here, this would be in your intermediate way of connecting those two together. Okay, so in this case, we're just we've done the 2 axis. Just want to clean that up just a little bit. And sanding is not very hard, but the smoother it is to start with, the best. Okay, so now I'm going to cut a little bit of V going in this direction. Now that V doesn't go all the way through. So in order for that to go through, we would end up with a really small bottom side. So I probably should have stopped and not done this V here at all. Or we could go a whole lot deeper, but it's not gonna look good. But I wanted to name this connection between those 2 elements. Okay, any questions on this? This is 2 axis.
So you do 2 to 2 to start with?
Center to
One
center to one.
Center to 1.
center to 1, center to 2. Right. Okay. So here's what you get when you do some of those. Center to 1, center to 2. Now, in this case, it's a butt base. The problem with it is where overhead. The problem was, can you see that little dark spot? That's a hole. Because the bud base hole, when I drilled it, this was too deep. So when you're gonna do a bud base, you might want to drill the hole first. And then hope you don't cut into it. Or just be really careful, stay away from that center too long. All right, so the third category is 2-axis parallel. So here we got a really nice long piece of wood. We're gonna set this up. So there's 2 axes on this one. Where are we? Overhead, okay. We've got a 1 and a 2. And the same on the bottom. These are 3/8 apart, so it's not too far apart. We're gonna start off, since I've already rounded it, I've kind of marked my thing where I want to start with. And this one, I'm going to do just some codes. So I'm going to hook number 1 and into number 1, both sides. So this is 2-axis parallel. Okay, what this should come out looking like is this. Okay, so I'm gonna cut a cove, a bead and a cove, fairly gently rounded. Should be fairly easy. Now, when I was doing this up at the Kerrville meeting, I had a brain fart somewhere. And I got lost in it and I couldn't figure out what I had done wrong and how to fix it. But when I got home, I looked at it again and I said, "Well, you stupid idiot, all you have to do is just keep cutting." Okay, so here we go. You don't want to cut too deep on these, again, because it'll get wonky. So I'm going to cut a cove through here and come up over a bead and a cove on this side. So let's start this direction. So you can hear the difference. This is about 1200. It's not very fast. So you can hear that all the air you're getting and then hitting and then drop. You crank that up to 18 and it's so much smoother. And I'm going to start on this side. Since this is 2-axis parallel, I'm going to do the cutting for that on one all together. Now, if you want to be real exacting as far as how deep you go, and make everything look pretty symmetrical, one thing that you can do is use your gauge. And if you feel like you're about the right depth on this cut, set your gauge and then make sure this one is about the same depth in this area. So these are the 2 coves. The bead will be on top. I have to round that a little bit more, probably deepen this just a little bit. So this one's, if you doing 4 or 5 of the different depths, then that'll give you some consistency. If you don't care about, being perfectly consistent or even close, then you just do it by eye and hope you don't overdo it.
And you're still cutting on the horizon, right? I mean, you're looking at the horizon.
Yeah, you can see the contour you're doing looking right out top here. So I'm gonna take this just a little more, smooth it out a little more. Then I'm gonna come up over top. And smooth that. I don't know how well can you see the shadow. Probably right where. Yeah. If you're having trouble on your lathe, then you put a piece of paper, white paper down. Sometimes that'll give you a better look at it. So I gotta take a little more here. Just to make that. I got that groove there I cut. I don't wanna leave that on. Still got a groove. They're all grooves. Okay. It's still got a groove, but I'm not gonna wanna take it anymore.
So,
Okay, no groove on this part.
Good.
Okay, so now, what would I do?
So back.
Sand, exactly. Okay, so we sanded it. So now we're gonna go to number 2. And do the other side. So this is 2 axes. Parallel to each other.
now on this side, you're doing two beads in a code.
2 beads in a cove. Exactly the opposite. I don't screw up. Now, cove should be in the middle. When in doubt, take a look. It's pretty thick. Are you on front? Yeah. Okay. So this is gonna be thin quite a bit more. And that's, again, this is all depends on how thick you want it. Okay, and I'm gonna start on the cove with the bead on the side. Now this is kind of tricky on the end. Okay,
And that's why you have safety center.
no tool rest. Got to pull down. You're sitting this knob here. Okay. So you're gonna be cutting in here to get your bead to go down in there. So I'm gonna cut in a little bit at the end. To get your line. To get that. Okay, now I'll start on this end. Sometimes it's splinter, try to cut downhill as much as you can, gives you a smoother. You can see this, there's quite a bit of it. Yeah, you got your curve. So now the question is, how much do you want to cut it back how thin you want to make it. That's up to you. So that's okay. Now this one is really pretty thin, but a little bit thinner than,
Well, that's the two parallel.
yes. 2 axis parallel. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. Any questions on this one? Pretty easy. Yeah, this is kind of a nice, it's a pretty curve, nice cookie contour. Now, when you get, for me, since I'm doing a lot of these for this, I like to have a solid round at the bottom and the top for my base. So I've got a 3/4 inch here for my hole to glue it in. And then I left that 1/2 inch. That gives me the opportunity to make a base. I'll cut it so it's round and then blend it with whatever this is. Sometimes blending that is difficult. Sometimes you're gonna take it off the lathe and sand it or use a rotary sander or something, a round bit to kind of blend those in there. They can be a little bit different, but most of them, you can get a pretty good blend on the end. Overhead. Okay, so this was 2 axis parallel, and this is what we came up now. If you don't want to make it real long like this, you can cut it and do the V's like this all the way down. That's the same thing. It's 2 axis. Okay. And if you want to make the baseball bat, that's what this is, 2 axis. So 1 axis is the ball, and I would do the ball first. And then the second axis is the bat, and you can do that. Now, the ball is outside the rest of that, so you know that this piece started much bigger. So here's a blank to do that with. So I've marked it for the ball, and we're overhead. And I've drawn the circles on the ends for this one's a ball, this one's a bat. So that gives me a pretty good idea of where I am. But when you're doing the bat, the ball and the bat, it takes a little more wood. Now you can make it smaller than this, but it just looks better. So if you want to go a step further than that, if you want to take the tip of the bat and make it cockeyed to the ball and the rest of the bat, as in this piece breaking off, then you go a different axis for cutting this piece. In order to figure that out, it's better to lay it on a piece of paper, draw the diameter for the ball, the diameter for the bat. And if this is gonna be wonky, then you wanna run an axis through it to see where you're gonna connect on the other end. And so you may have to have a huge blank to do that. However, in this case, when I turned a full-size bat and I bent this, put this in and made it cockeyed like it was breaking off, and the axis was way over here somewhere. So what I do, I took a 3/4 inch block of wood, as big as I needed it to go out, and I could attach it to this end and this end. And so my axis, I could make them out as far as I want to go. So you can always put another piece of wood. You don't have to have exactly the same diameter all the way through. So you can do that and do this. Okay, so here's another example. This is just a V shape, 2 parallel axes with a V cut. And I took a class one time and we were doing this, and they said, I thought they said it was exotic turning. And I got to the class and they did this shape. And I said, whoa, they can't spell, it was ER, not EX for exotic. So anyway, so you can see what you can do. There are things that you can make different to spice things up a little bit. This is number 4. So this is two axes, but rather than both, so here's the 1 and the 2, and they're on this axis here. But if I flip this over, these other two axes are on well, no, it's not 90 degrees. That's the same. It's not. So, but you can do this with a twist. So you go 1 to 2 and 2 to 1, and you get a deal like this. So this is just plain old two axes again. Or you can do this, which is what I was just thinking of doing. So you got your 1 and 2 axis here. If you flip it and put your 1 and 2 going the other direction, then you get a little different configuration. Flip it one more time. Okay, these are going axis here, and these are changing here. So it's still two axes. But I think in the long run, it's not a whole lot different. These are the parallel axis. These are parallel also, except it's 90 degrees twist actually. So there is some difference, but not a whole lot. So the next two axes is two axes to center. And so these are samples of two axes to center. I think these are kind of fun and cool. It kind of looks like a planet with rings around it or something. And it's just kind of a fun thing for me to do. This is probably one of the first ones I did. Again, this is one of those where you need a fairly good sized piece of wood so you can move that axis out to the edge. And the way this one goes is you got a center and an outside axis, but when you flip it, your other outside axis is at the other opposite corner than this one. So, and this is the same way. This was done this way. It was just done multiple times to give you an idea. So we're going to go to number 7, which is three axis parallel. So 3 axis parallel, you're going to go number 1 to number 1 and so on, so forth down the line. So again, I've rounded this. I've got it marked. These are a ½ inch out. So I'm going to have to be a little bit careful.
Randy, did you ever do any where you like a ½ inch on one side and 3/4 on the other, or they're varying spots?
You can.
No, I'm just asking you.
No. Well, in the manner of speaking, that one is the number 1.
Yeah.
It's way off center, but I haven't done that much yet.
Okay.
I've been working to get these kind of set up. So, okay, so this is 3 axis. So I'm going to do a bead for each of the 3 axis, and then the connecting pieces to it. Okay. All right. So this is number 1. And double check here. And once you have this set, since all 3 axes for these are all the same distance from the center, the tool rest should be okay. Now, if you're going to go sanding, obviously you're going to move the tool rest out of the way. And go from there. Here we go. So I'm going to do a bead. This is my center line for the bead. Then I'll cut a V shape down in on both sides into it, and then form a bead. I'm going to do V there. I'm going to start my V on three sides. That's my center. Now, in order to do a bead, obviously, I'm going to have to get down to solid all the way. Where the deep part is round. And there's a lot of air. I'm not in solid wood yet on the V. I'll show you. So there's the bead is forming, but look at all the air wood there. So there's quite a ways to go, and this is going to be kind of thin.
Oh, yeah.
So if that's too thin, stop. Regroup. Now, what I'm going to do here on the top is I'm going to change my position. These are right now my positions here in this one. I'm going to move it in, and I can do that. I'm going to move it in right here. And that gives me about that's quarter inch or so, maybe a little more. Probably wouldn't move it that much, but that will keep me from getting this really too thin out here. Or do you want me to see? You want to see where we go with that? I mean, I don't have a problem. You know, it's okay. We can stop it. I mean, we can do that just to give you an idea of where it is. Sure, I mean, you better follow that. Yeah. You okay? Okay. So, all right, let's go with it.
You're a mask.
I got 6 masks. No, it's all done. Give me the bat.
The number you asked.
I should know better. Yeah, okay. Right now, I'm just cutting them down till we get solid wood. And then we'll look at it and we'll see how thin it is. Round it a little bit. So the smaller it gets, then the smaller the bead. We gotta be. It doesn't look as I like the bigger bead, so I'm way off the line. Okay. So we're almost round. There's still a flat here. So it's gotta go smaller. So let's see where we're gonna end up. Don't have a line there. That's the nice thing about the lines is that you can see I've still got a flat because my line shut. So I'm not gonna take any more off, but so you can see where we are. So now, I mean, this is how, actually I could cut my bead, but you're gonna, when you make the bead, it's gonna get thinner on each end, right? So I could leave this just as a flat. And I could kind of explain. Yeah, it's a great tool for a lot of this. Not everything, but some of it. Do this. There. So now we're almost around that point. So that's how big that's gonna be. Now, if I do the next one at the same place, it's gonna be way over here. However, you've got this space that's gonna connect the two together. but you can see they get pretty thin. And this is an example of what's going on here. I guess I could put here, but you can see this is pretty thin. I'm surprised this didn't get wonky, but it seemed to finish up pretty good. I'd rather make it bigger. So this is 3/8 of an inch. This was a 1/2 inch. So this is probably a good thing to pass on. Any reason to keep going on this? Okay, so you have an idea what's going on. So this was a 1/2 inch, this is a 3/8 of an inch. So this is the same thing. As you can see. That's what would happen. Now, the caveat to that is if you leave this space here in there as part of your design, you can get away with it.
Looks like a cat.
Now,
So it looks like a cat tree.
yeah, it looks like a crane. Yeah. Okay, so here I screwed up and I cut this off and I said, "Ooh, that's just about ready to start flying." But if you leave this piece in between full like that, then you might get away with it.
Put it down just a little bit so we can see the front camera.
Oh, it's
right here.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing to do when you have a piece like this is when you start pressing the two ends together, since it's pretty thin, or especially at this end. So get a block of wood. That fits in there, make it cut a piece that fits. Glue it in, hot melt glue. That way, when you put the number 2 holes right here, it supports what you got. So it's not gonna snap off or bend up on you. And I've learned how to do that a few times. So that just gives you the support now. Once you cut your second one, then you're gonna wanna put a block of wood in it also. And then you can probably get away with the third one, since these are already blocked up, that you can get away with just cutting it carefully, and you're good to go. So this is just another example of 3-axis parallel in the shape that you make. Okay, so we'll pass this. So all these in here, you can see where we can overhead. You can see this one got pretty thin. It didn't break, but oh yeah, no, it didn't. This end down there was pretty thin. So the axes were for this small piece of wood were just too far apart. So the 3-axis twisted is you go from 1 to 2, 1 on one and 2 on the other, and then 2 to 3, and then 3 to 1. So you get something like this, or like this. These are not too similar or too different. They're both 1/2 inch off center. They still have a little beef. One thing I've noticed, and I don't know if it's me or just the characteristic, is you go from one end to the other, it always seems like the one end has got a smaller bead. And I don't know, and I can't explain that unless it's my technique, which it may well be. Here also is a thing that you can develop for the same thing. 3-axis twisted. A little more. Oops, sorry. And this looks like a propeller or something. So this has a cut, one cut, and it has a second cut and a third cut. So all 3 axes, as they're twined together, form this shape.
And those are all the codes. Yeah, just codes.
Yes, all codes. The other way you can do this is the long stick, as in the one there. It's twisted. So you've got 3 axes twisted. This may show it a little bit better. But so that's another option. And you can combine all of it together in any way, shape, or form you want to. So there's just, many things to do. So that was, number 8, right? So number 9 is 3-axis to center. So you want to know how to do this one, because this, you can make a tool handle. That way, when you put your tool down, it doesn't roll off your leg and stab you in the foot. It's got
What in life is that?
3 sides, huh?
Where's the fun in life in that?
Well, it saves a few toes. So,
Fingers.
so this is what I made with the gracious help of a friend of mine that lives out of town. He has a very good friend, a buddy, from a relative, so maybe he's not such a good one. But he did the metal work to make this. This is it looks similar to the robust deal. It's got the collet inside. The collets are, you put different sizes, anywhere from an 1/8 inch up to probably close to 3/4, different size shafts in it. But this is a triangular shape.
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Let's show there. So that it doesn't roll off, and it's very comfortable. It fits a hand very nicely. So this is really a good shape to use. So this is 3-axis to center. So what you're going to do is your center is going to be this end. So you probably, if you're going to do one of these type of things, it doesn't matter if it's, I don't know, Mahoney selling these things, and a couple other people, I think, to insert. You got to drill a hole. Probably it'd be smart to drill a hole, maybe even put on your collar for strength, and then just use a bigger point on this end and do your 3 different axes on this end. Now, this is 3-axis twisted, 3-axis to center. Okay, so the center is this end, the 3 different axes is on this end. I would think that if you do 3 parallel axes, that you would come up with a nicer, flatter, because if you get down towards this end with on center, it tends to get more almost round. Of course, then that's good for your column here. And it is a little bit round right in here, so the transition is there. So if you actually lay this on your lathe in that way, you may still get some roll as long as it's flattened up back here to keep it going. But you could do that. The only bad thing is if you're doing 3-axis parallel, then you could need to have your 3-axis down here. So what I would do then is chuck this end, or make a pennant on this end so you can chuck it. Do your 3-axis there, do 3-axis here, but then you can chuck this end to drill your hole and finish this end. That make sense? Any questions? Sure. Okay. All right. So this is either number 9. Here's another picture of the 3-axis. Which one was on above? Front. Pretty good. This one's pretty, shows you the 3-axis pretty clear.
So when you do your 3-axis, I noticed your offset is much larger. It's like a 1/2 inch or almost 3/4 of an inch. As opposed to the others were like 3/8 of an inch.
Yeah. So on that one, so
Yeah.
this one is, what is this say on there?
1/2 inch.
1/2 inch. Okay. Yeah, I played it out a little bit to kind of feel how, the size of handle I wanted and how much flat it. So the 1/2 inch would work out fine. All right, so we'll move on to the next category, which is 4. So you can do 4-axis parallel, or you can do 4-axis twisted. So number 10 is 4-axis parallel. So let me grab a couple of those. So and I'm not gonna turn this, these are 4-axis parallel. And here's one of those deals where it got pretty wonky. So what did I do? I put the block in, glued it in, so I could finish turning it. Otherwise it would have blown out. But this is what would be better. So this was 1/2 inch, and this is 1/4 inch off center. So you can see there's a little more wood, a little more stability on this one, and this was gonna get out of control at this end. Because I changed the axis after these 2 turns, and I said, no, it's not gonna work, so I went ahead and did this one over. Now this is just coves. And there's 4 coves, these are parallel. And it's fairly nice, it's kind of a nice looking piece. So these worked out pretty good. Okay, so pass those around.
So when you're doing these, you do one code, then change your axis.
Right.
Next one, go.
Yep.
Go down right.
Yeah, so it's 4 times now.
But I mean, you would never do this code and then.
Oh, sure, you can do that.
And
Yeah. And I mean, you can take the cove, you can make a bead in between or a bead. You can connect those coves closer together. And that will give you a constant twist all the way around. But you can make them a sharper edge. I mean, it's kind of an endless guess on how you want to do that. So these 2 are number 10. Yeah, it looks a lot like that other one. 4-axis parallel. Has that got this one has number 10 written on it somewhere? Yeah.
password.
I think it does. But this is one with yeah, okay. So, yeah, this is number 10 also. And this is number 10, and this is 2 beads on the ends, and then just V cuts and the rest. Actually, these 2 V cuts were cut in the center. Went back to the center and cut these 2. And then these were done off center. And that's 3, 4. So there's a big variety. All right, so we have one more to do. So this is going to be a 4-axis twisted. So we're going to go headstock 1 to tail 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 1. And it's really not a whole lot different than what we did with 3 axis. You get somewhat of what are we doing time in? It is 8. How's your guys' class feeling? You ready to go?
That's what he missed it.
Okay. All right, so we'll put this in line and we'll start it off. We can do it with beads. We can do it with beads. So this is 3/8. So we should have enough beef between everything. Does anybody have a desire what shape? I mean, we could start off with a bead and then we can change it every other, we have 4 different ones. Anything? Okay. All right. We'll start off, we'll do the beads if we can. Shouldn't get as thin as it did before. So each line, I've got a bead and a bead and a bead and a bead. 1, 2, 3, 4 beads. This is twisted. Oh, wait a minute. This is twisted. So I got to go to 2. I'm glad you asked. Thank you.
So we parallel from the.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Okay.
This is,
1 to 2.
this was
1 to 2.
This is one, yeah, it's supposed to.
Yeah.
this is
File that.
Do it now.
This is number 1.
Yeah.
Didn't quite look wonky enough.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so this mark, I want to have that's my center of my bead, so I'm gonna cut a V on both sides. Hopefully get in and get it rounded. This is close. So now I'm gonna start to round my bead in. Not the best bead. I'm getting better though. I've had a lot of practice last couple of weeks. Okay, I think my line almost disappeared. My bead line, take a look. Oh, there's still a little piece there, right? Not quite as round as centered as I wanted it. Take a look. Okay, it's left, a little bit left, but that's fine. I'm gonna leave it. I don't want to get too much further in there. I'm gonna cut this back a little bit more. As I said before, this line, you want to cross over a little bit, set you up for. All right, let's see how that works. Okay, so we're over the line here, but we still have quite a bit of line here, so we'll see how that works. I'm gonna clean this up just a little bit like that. So don't forget to sand. You can sand all this part if you're happy with this end. I always look at this end to see how many bumps I have in it. And you can see a few circular rings, but that'll sand that real easy. Or you can go back and play with some more. You can see a little bump here. And, but that's gonna come out when we do this bead here. Okay, so we're 1 to 2. Time to crank it up, go to 2. To 3. Keep me honest. Again, make sure that's tight. Okay, questions? Okay. Onward. Okay, our center of our bead is here. So we're gonna start cutting back. Now, if you wanted bigger beads, it would be nice, probably should have brought that in closer on your, than what I did. No. I was wondering why it takes so long to do that one. It seems like it's right there. And takes a lot longer. Okay. Now, we'll look at this piece here, so you can see how much flat is there. So we need to cut that in that direction more. And, or if it's not working out, we'll cut it we'll go back to the last axis and cut it there. So it takes a little practice and it takes a little maneuvering back and forth to get that axis right, so we'll try and accommodate that this way. You may end up with a longer piece here, and we're almost got it. So we have one more little cut. You know how that last cut goes. A little further already. No, it's not that kind of. So just cut it. Make those last cuts as smooth as you can. See what we got? Okay, now once we sand that should sharpen up good. Okay, this side, I want to smooth it up a little bit. It's still got a mark on it, but we're moving on. So this side, I'm going to cut back. See how smooth it is. That's still got some bumps. So one more pass, maybe. You can hear it bumping. That's not too bad. Okay, so I sharpen this up in between here. But go and we sand it and then move on. So that's 2, and 3, and the 4. What's 4? Must be down here. Now this is, it's got pretty good wood, but gotta be a little bit careful probably as far as. All right, so what we got now is here's our bead center, and we go from there. We have our connection. Oh, wow, we got a bunch here. A whole bunch. Still got a little flat. Take another cut or two. So again, look at my point. So I know where I'm going to enter in. Somewhere in there. Okay, so now we got a sharp edge there. Get a little bounce. If we wanted to, we could go back and make this just a hair deeper there, but that's fine. All right, last one. Wow. It's amazing how many nights that you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about doing this. You know, maybe I'm nuts, I don't know. Okay. Last one, here's our center, our circle. We can get it to the bottom of the pit. 2 minutes. This thing cranks up pretty quick. It's a little trickier. Making a big, because it is, you know, at the end. Well, that's. Shift. Pick up. I'm going a little faster than probably what I would do at home. Well, not everybody. Tip of the other. I don't want to bore up there. I have one demo of that. Well, I've given you plenty of examples to look at that should cover that pretty well. Now, personally, I think I would have put these backwards a little bit closer. So there's a little more beef on the beads. But the line there just irritating. I had to quit putting the lines on there. I think take a look at this, see where we are on this guy. Still a little flat. I got a chip out there. And that does happen. Some of it depends on the wood too. If you got a really good hardwood, you don't get that as much. This is a power, I think. But it, you know, it works pretty good. I didn't look, did I still have a line? What's I see? Now the trick will be when I get home to clean these up and hope they're not too wonky. This one's looking like. I want to make it rounder, but if I do, I have to go deeper here. And that just weakens it more. So. Keep it slightly. That's not good. Oh, there's still a flat. Look, there it is. That felt so nice. There's a little line. Okay. So I'm going to, let's see, this is good. I'm going to take this back just a little bit and then we'll put it back on center and see how to finish up the end. A little bit. Okay. So now, yeah, I did cut the tip right there, left a nice groove.
It's just really cut right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of. Okay, so now we'll see if we can round this end and shape the transition and see how that works. They're not the easiest thing to do. We're just going to do one end. So I have this marked. So this line here, I'm gonna go ahead and take my parting tool. And score that so I know where my. I do that on both ends. And then I'll come back in. That's on centers now on both ends. And bring this down to rounds. Fun. Work. They're still flat. Yeah, just a little bit more. So that's the beauty of that center. If that had been a 4-prong center, it probably would have ripped out. It just spun when I hit this chip on this end. Okay, let me clean that up. Use my skew. Be the easiest thing to do, then I can get flat. Okay, so now it's round. And actually that transition didn't look too bad. So I'd leave it just like that and go from there. Let's see. So I have one other. So here's one that I did today, the 6th. And they are a 1/4 inch off. Where are we? Yeah. It's quarter inch off center. So there's 6 of them. Well, when I got to this one, I was working on this guy here and broke off. It was getting wonky. I knew it was getting wonky and I'm thinking, okay, I should probably put some support on there. But oh, just one more cut. Okay, so it's split. Can you see the blue line? So I glued it back, I cleaned it up and glued it back together. And I put this rod on here. So this rod goes up to this and it's glued onto this guy, this end. And so then I turned this one and then it started getting wonky again. So I ended up putting another one. But I could finish it, it didn't fall apart on it. Okay, so then I put this stick on and then I could finish the rest. But I'm kind of surprised it got this, again, if you look at the size of these beads, and they tend to get smaller as we go, and I don't understand why. Maybe because it's the same distance from the axis and everything.
They're getting braver as you move up. You know.
No, braver, made it stupider. So anyhow, this is 6th parallel. You can pass it around. So what I want to do is, let's see. It's pull this one off. See a whole lot of difference in these. As far as, can you tell if it's 3 or 4 axis? Okay, now, the difference between these two guys is what?
Twisted versus parallel.
No? They're both twisted. But 3/8 and 1/2 inch.
Ah,
A lot more beef left in the 3/8 than this guy. I didn't have a problem turning this. I didn't have to put braces on it. I'm not sure how, why. Maybe that other piece of wood was just too thick, this one was not very good grain, but if you look at these guys that have 4-axis or 3-axis, if they're similar type beads and codes or just V's or stuff, I'm not sure that there's a hell of a lot of difference in them. Other than a lot more work. 3 is quicker and easier than 4, but, so it's one of those things that there's more variations out there between all of these that you can do to your heart's pleasure, and this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, really. They're kind of fun to do, and I think for gizmos like this, it's kind of cool. So, any questions? Did I cover everything?
I can't think you're the Dr. Seuss of spindle turtles.
I'll tell you. I've done a lot of practice and the results are not, you saw some of the outcomes and, they're also different. Okay, this one's different. This one is a combination of center turning on the 2 ends and then off turning in the center. So there you go. You can, mix and match like So when you start doing that,
Write it down.
write it down on a sheet, just like this. And by the time next meeting, there are probably going to be 24 or 5 options that you guys should discover. And if you're planning on making a set of these, say, you want to make 4 candlesticks that are exactly the same, good luck. It is. Now, maybe if it looked like the gear shift, like this, you might be able to do that in this configuration. But when you start cutting these angles and the beads and to get a duplicate is really hard. Now, maybe
Further apart, just put them further apart.
well, all that does is change these angles, right? So,
No, but I mean, what they made before.
oh, yeah, well,
It's a lot
yeah,
bigger.
don't let anybody get them close together to see the difference. That's right. Yeah, one per house. But yeah, you can go crazy of trying to figure out exactly all over this and make it so different. Now, what's her name? Yeah, Barbara. She'll teach you how to do a goblet. Okay, the goblet itself is just turn. And the way she taught us to do that is that goblet goes in the chuck. And then you just rotate the thing in the chuck. And then you do the goblet on the free end to start with. And then you take that thing and crank it over and tighten it up and cut one of your off centers. And then you turn it, hit it again, do another off center. That's the way you do a goblet. No, that's one way to do it. But that other end is flopping free. You don't put a center up or anything on it. Cut the goblet, hollow it, shape it the way you want it, and then crank it over it a little bit in your.
Just fill it and forget it.
There you go. Thanks for your attention. I hope you come off with some idea of how to do this.